Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life when we are forced to confront the shadow. Not just within ourselves, but in others. We meet those whose charm is a mask, whose love is a tool, and whose truth is as shifting as sand in the wind. These are not merely difficult people. They are narcissists, masters of illusion, tyrants of the soul as victims, lovers or saviors. To confront such a person is no small thing. They live not in reality, but in a fragile mirror they demand the world to hold up for them. And yet, within that mirror lies their greatest vulnerability. A truth so profound and so simple, that it can shake the very foundation of their false identity. The narcissist exists in a world not quite our own, a world constructed not from truth but from fragments of admiration, envy and manipulation. This world is fragile, though it appears bold, it is hollow, though it projects grandeur. At the center of it all lies a wound deep, unacknowledged, and ancient. The narcissist is not simply arrogant or selfish as so many misunderstand. Rather, they are perpetually at war with their own sense of emptiness, and this war requires constant fuel. That fuel is your attention, your approval, your emotional reactions. Whether loving or furious, adoring or afraid. They do not care if you love them or hate them. What they need is that you look at them, respond to them, orbit around them. You are the mirror, and without it they do not know they exist. This is not metaphorical. The narcissist cannot hold a stable sense of self without external reinforcement. Their entire identity has been built through the eyes of others. First perhaps a parent they could never please, or a wound left by abandonment, ridicule, or conditional affection. The persona they wear, confident, charming, magnetic, is not who they are, but who they believe they must be to deserve existence. It is an armor built not from strength but from terror. They are terrified of being unmarkable, terrified of being wrong, terrified of being unmasked, and so they perfect the mask. But the mask is expensive to maintain, it requires conformance, it requires control, and most of all it requires an audience. This is why the narcissist is always performing even in silence. A compliment is never just a compliment, it is bait. A question is never just curiosity, it is a test. A conversation is not for understanding. It is a manipulation, subtle or overt, to keep the spotlight on them, to reassert the fantasy they must believe in. Because if the fantasy dies they fear they will too. Yet there is a more sinister aspect. While the narcissist appears confident, it is not confidence but dependency. They are addicted to the reflections others give them. The way a starving person clings to crumbs. This is why they devalue those closest to them. Because dependency breeds resentment, and resentment breeds cruelty. The more they need you, the more they fear you. The more you reflect their fragility back to them, even unconsciously. The more they seek to control, punish, or discard you. They cannot tolerate contradiction. A simple challenge to their narrative can provoke rage, withdrawal, or a calculated campaign to discredit you. This is not rational behavior, it is survival. You have threatened their identity. You have tugged at the seams of the illusion, and they cannot allow that. And so they rewrite the story. They become the victim. You become unstable, selfish, toxic, anything to keep the mask intact. What makes this dynamic so destructive is that it is not always obvious. Narcissists do not always shout. Many are soft-spoken, articulate, even seemingly empathetic, but only so long as they are in control. Their empathy is strategic, not heartfelt. Their kindness is conditional, not consistent. And their love, if you can call it that, is not offered to nourish you but to ensnare you. Love becomes a transaction, an obligation, a tool. Once you are no longer useful, or worse, once you begin to see through them, the love turns to ice. The punishment begins, and still, we stay. Why? Because the narcissist doesn't trap us with cruelty. Not at first. They trap us with magic, with the dream of being seen, adored, chosen. They study your needs, your wounds, your desires, and reflect them back with uncanny precision. You feel known, you feel special, you feel alive. But you are not seen. You are being scanned, mirrored, used. And once you are hooked, the cycle begins. Idealized, devalued, discard, repeat. Many who have lived through this cycle come to doubt their own sanity. That is part of the design. Gaslighting, promotional withdrawal. These are not random behaviors. They are weapons of control. To make you doubt your perception is to make you dependent. And the more dependent you are, the safer they feel. Not because they love you, but because you are less likely to leave. Less likely to stop reflecting their fantasy. But the greatest threat to a narcissist is not criticism. It is not exposure. It is not revenge. It is indifference. It is the moment you no longer reflect their mask. The moment you step outside their illusion and refuse to play the role they've written for you. That moment is the beginning of their unraveling. Because they do not know who they are without the mirror. And without your energy, they are left to face what they have spent a lifetime avoiding. Themselves. To fight a narcissist is to step into a battlefield that they designed, one they know intimately and control invisibly. They will bait you, provoke you, wound you subtly or directly, and then accuse you of being the aggressor. They draw you in with a carefully calculated dance of chaos and seduction, one where your instincts betray you and your emotions become tools for their manipulation. The moment you attempt to reason, to explain, to defend, you are already entangled. Every response you give, no matter how logical or heartfelt, becomes part of the script they are writing in their favor. You think you're clarifying, they're rewriting. You think you're setting a boundary, they're setting a trap. This is not dialogue, it is theater. And the narcissist always casts themselves as the misunderstood protagonist or the innocent victim, never the antagonist. They will force you into roles: aggressor, crazy one, savior, betrayer. Anything but a whole person with autonomy and clarity in this dynamic. The most dangerous illusion is the belief that you can make them understand. That if you just speak calmly enough, give enough evidence, show enough pain, they will finally see what they've done. But they do see, not in the way you hope, but in the way a predator sees the movements of its prey. Your vulnerability is not moving to them, it is useful. Your tears are not a call for empathy. They are a signal of control regained. Your anger is not a boundary, it is a confirmation that they still have power. This is the terrifying truth: they don't want peace, they want control. They don't want harmony, they want dominance dressed as closeness. And so the more you engage, the deeper you sink into the illusion that something real is being built, when in fact, the only thing being constructed is your dependency and their superiority. This is why conventional conflict resolution fails with a narcissist. Normal human disagreements are based on a shared reality, a mutual willingness to grow or repair. The narcissist does not operate within this framework. Their reality shifts according to their needs. Facts bend, conversations from weeks ago are rewritten. Your words are repeated back to you with distorted intent. If they are charming, they will seduce you with vulnerability and poetic self-awareness, only to use those same confessions later as weapons. If they are more overtly dominant, they will gaslight you into believing that your pain is evidence of your own dysfunction. Either way, they keep you spinning. They train you to question your instincts, abandon your needs, and perform endless emotional labor for the crumbs of their intermittent affection. You begin to live for their approval, which they withhold until it becomes currency in the power dynamic. The escape from this cycle does not come through winning arguments or exposing their behavior. Those acts, while momentarily satisfying, often escalate the cycle or feed the narcissist's narrative of being attacked. The true escape, the real act of rebellion, is silence. Not the silence of resentment, which they can still feed off, but the silence of neutrality. Of no longer being reactive, no longer needing to explain, no longer needing them to validate your reality. This is a silence rooted in seeing clearly, and in choosing freedom over validation. It is not angry, it is not cold, it is not performative. It is simply the absence of engagement, and for a narcissist, that absence is unbearable. You become a mirror that no longer reflects, a source of supply that no longer flows, an audience that no longer claps. To a narcissist, this is not just rejection, it is annihilation. Because without your reactions, they must sit with the void they have avoided all their life. That void is not yours to fix, and your presence will not heal it. No matter how much love you offer, no matter how many second chances you give, healing was never their goal, control was. The moment you realize this, your silence transforms from passive retreat to radical defiance. You are no longer playing the game, and in refusing to play you render their manipulations powerless. Your indifference is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the ultimate form of resistance in a relationship built on distortion. But reaching this indifference is not easy. It requires deep inner work. To let go of the fantasy, to mourn the illusion, to grieve the time lost. It requires looking at your own wounds that made you susceptible to their charm. The narcissist does not create your wounds, but they exploit them, masterfully. And in walking away, in stepping into that calm stillness, you are not just freeing yourself from them. You are reclaiming parts of yourself that you had long forgotten. You begin to remember what it feels like to not walk on eggshells, to not question your worth, to not measure your value by someone else's erratic affection. You return to yourself, not with drama, but with quiet dignity, and in that silence, in that refusal to feed the lie anymore, the narcissist meets the one thing they cannot manipulate. Your peace. There is a moment in the journey away from the narcissist when words, for all their weight, become unnecessary, and yet one sentence remains, not because it wounds, not because it seeks revenge, but because it signals the end of a dynamic built entirely in your emotional labor and their emotional consumption. This sentence is simple: But it carries the weight of awakening, of truth spoken not in rage but in clarity, not as a weapon but as a doorway. When you say, "I see who you are, and I no longer need anything from you," you are not just communicating a message, you are delivering a rupture in the reality they've tried to hold you inside. It is not an accusation, which they would eagerly twist into justification for more chaos. It is not a plea which they would interpret as weakness to be exploited. It is not a warning which they would challenge as a threat. It is none of these things. It is the one thing they cannot bear. A mirror held steady with no emotion behind it. Just seeing, just knowing, just finality in those few words. You strip away the illusions, the roles, the manipulations. You are no longer the echo chamber they depend on. You are no longer their emotional oxygen. You are no longer available for their games of control disguised as intimacy. And more than that, you are no longer seeking anything they have used to keep you close. Not their apology, not their validation, not their change, not even their acknowledgement. The moment you no longer need, they no longer own. That is the point of collapse for them, because need is the hook. And the hook is what keeps you tied to the performance. Once you are free of that need, not pretending, not posturing but genuinely free, you become untouchable. Not because you are invincible, but because you have remembered the truth of who you are without their distortion of it. A narcissist lives in a delusion, where power is derived from being the one others want. Fear, love or hate, their entire sense of self is built on being desired, being important, being central. When you say, "I no longer need anything from you," you remove yourself from the story they've written where you were a supporting character designed to reflect their greatness or absorb their flaws. You rewrite the story by walking out of the pages entirely. And they are left not with a villain to blame or a victim to control, but with silence, absence, void. That void terrifies them, because it reminds them of what lies beneath the mask. Nothing solid, nothing whole, just a hollow identity propped up by others' attention. And in that moment, when you take your attention away and pair it with awareness, they are left to face what they've avoided their entire lives. This sentence is powerful not because it is clever, but because it is clean. There is no drama in it, no malice, no attempt to control or provoke. It is pure self-possession. It is you standing in your center, no longer orbiting them, no longer trying to win, no longer seeking to be chosen or understood. And what the narcissist fears most is someone who no longer needs to be chosen. Because that person cannot be manipulated through scarcity, through affection withdrawn, through promises dangled and withheld. They fear those who have awakened to the fact that all the worth, all the peace, all the love they were searching for in the narcissist was never truly there. It was always within, waiting to be reclaimed. You become frightening not because you are cruel, but because you are free in freedom. To the narcissist is a kind of betrayal. Not because you have wronged them but because you have dismantled the illusion that they are essential. They must believe they are necessary to your identity, your happiness, your sense of self. That belief is what keeps them inflated. The sentence strips that belief bare. When you say you see them, not the mask, not the role but the actual pattern, the hollow mechanism. And when you declare that you no longer need what they have falsely promised, you unmake the spell. It's not a fight, it's not a speech. It's not a lecture, it's just a release. And they will feel it like an earthquake, not because you attacked, but because you exited with clarity. And clarity is something they cannot distort, cannot negotiate, cannot spin into something that recenters them. But to speak that sentence with truth, you must come to it through inner work, not reaction. You must come to see your own pattern. The ways you held on, the reasons you kept hoping, the fears that kept you tethered. You must walk for the grief of letting go of what you thought was real. Only then does the sentence become more than words. It becomes a threshold. You step across it not to punish, but to return to yourself, and in that return you become the one thing they cannot control, cannot seduce, cannot explain away. You become whole to arrive at the place where those words, "I see who you are, and I no longer need anything from you," can be spoken not in bitterness, not in performance but in full, rooted truth. Requires something far greater than insight into the narcissist's behavior. It demands an awakening within yourself. A turning inward to face what drew you into the web in the first place. For the narcissist's power over you was never simply about their manipulation. It was about your longing. Longing to be seen, to be chosen. To finally be enough in the eyes of someone whose approval felt like a prize. Because they made it so scarce, so conditional, so intoxicating when given and so devastating when withheld. The cycle pulls you in because it mirrors old wounds, early scripts, stories you learned about love being earned, worth being proven, safety being inconsistent. And when you meet the narcissist, it does not feel like manipulation at first. It feels like recognition, like coming home. Like finally being understood in a way that bypasses logic. But what you are being drawn into is not connection. It is enmeshment. The dissolving of your boundaries under the illusion of closeness. The narcissist sees this vulnerability, not with compassion, but with precision. They study it, shape themselves to fit it, feed it just enough to make you invest, then begin the slow erosion. They train you to believe that love comes through performance. That affection is conditional, that your sense of reality is unreliable. And somewhere along the way you begin to internalize this distortion. To believe that if only you could do or be something different, you could bring back the version of them that once made you feel alive. But that version was never real. It was always a hook, a projection designed to capture your need. The moment you see that, truly see it, not just intellectually but somatically, emotionally, soul deep, a shift begins. You stop justifying, you stop fighting for what was never actually there. And in that stillness, you start to remember yourself. Remembering yourself after narcissistic entanglement is not a single realization. It is a process of reclaiming. Reclaiming your right to feel without explanation, to think without apology, to exist without being filtered through another's approval. It is rediscovering your own voice beneath the noise of their distortion, hearing again your own intuition that had been slowly silenced by years of second guessing. This is where the real work begins, not in fixing them, not in exposing them, but in returning to the parts of you that were once willing to believe that love had to come through struggle. This is not about shame. It is about illumination. You see now how the patterns were born, how they were reinforced, how the narcissist simply stepped into a role that matched your unmet needs and amplified them to a point of crisis. But crisis, if met with courage, becomes clarity. That clarity becomes the ground on which you stand when you finally say that sentence. Not as an act of defense, but as an act of liberation. You speak it not to hurt them, but to affirm yourself. Not to provoke a reaction, but to end the performance. Because when you truly no longer need anything from them, not the apology, not the closure, not even their understanding, you become immune to their tactics. The silence that follows is not empty, it is sacred. It is the silence of a soul returning to wholeness. And the narcissist, who thrives on engagement, finds in that silence a reflection of something they cannot face. Their own emptiness. You do not need to announce this transformation. You do not need them to witness it. That need, too, fades with healing. The awakening is internal. You no longer operate from lack. You no longer bargain with pain. You no longer identify with being the one who is always trying harder. Instead, you begin to live in alignment with your own truth, quietly and firmly, without explanation or permission. You set boundaries not to punish but protect. You say no without guilt. You walk away without theatrics. And in doing so, you model something the narcissist cannot understand. Authenticity without performance, love without control, presence without pretense. This terrifies them. Not because you have power over them, but because you no longer exist within their narrative. You are no longer a character in their drama. You have stepped off the stage and into your own life. And that absence becomes a mirror they cannot bear to look into. But your task is not to hold that mirror for them. It is to keep walking. Healing is not about proving anything to them. It is about no longer needing to. The moment you realize you do not need to be seen by someone who refuses to see you, loved by someone who only knows how to possess, or validated by someone who builds themselves by eroding others, you are free in a way that no argument, no confrontation, no revenge could ever give you. It is the quiet, steady freedom of coming home to yourself and never leaving again. So remember this: the greatest power is not found in domination but in detachment. Not in proving your worth, but in knowing it. When you say, "I see who you are, and I no longer need anything from you," you are not just freeing yourself. You are ending the illusion for both of you. And that, my friends, is how you turn fear into freedom. Thank you.